Hi. They call me Grandpa Al for the most part. This is a bit of a story about my autistic grandson and namesake, Little Al. He was born in November 1993, and when he was born, he had blood coming from his eyes, nose, mouth, and his ears. And I knew that he was going to be a little one with lots of problems down the road. I asked if he could bear my name because I immediately fell in love with the little guy. They granted me my wish, and as he started to grow, a year, 2, 3 years old, 4 years old, he wasn't very verbal. He was rather recluse, withdrawn, and he didn't do what the other kids normally do. We have 21 grandchildren and 4 excuse me, this is hard for me. 4 great-grandchildren with another one on the way, due in July of 16. We're very proud of all of them. They've all accomplished great things and are working and have good spouses and good great grandchildren for us. But little Al's the one closest to my heart. He has been from the very beginning. He went through kindergarten and didn't do very well. First grade, he didn't do very well at all. He had to repeat first grade. And he had troubles all through school. He was about 9 years old when they took him to the Autism Center at Children's Hospital in Milwaukee, where they diagnosed him with Asperger's syndrome. They started tracking his progress through school. I forget the name of the tracking. IRPs, I believe they're called. Tracking his progress every year. Well, he was slow. He didn't speak very much. He was awkward, socially, physically. He would get fixated on a subject, and that's all he could talk about, no matter what was going on in class. And became the target of bullies from early on, 2nd, 3rd grade. He'd get kicked and punched, and as he grew older, things grew worse. He'd get beat up, he'd get his books taken, a very long list of problems. And it was when he was about 12 years old, he had 2 half-sisters who were a little advanced for their age, let's put it that way. One kept bouncing back and forth between my son, which is her father, of course, and her mother. Well, her mother had 7 kids by 6 men, I believe it was. She was extremely promiscuous. And whenever his half-sister went over there, she would see a lot of things that little girls shouldn't see. Not at that age, by far. She was 12, same age as little Al. And she would come back to my son's place and disseminate all that good adult information to her little sister, who, like I mentioned before, was advanced for her age. And they used to play little games of dare. And they would dare my grandson to drop his pants, and they would sit and laugh at him and poke fun at him. They even went so far as they didn't want him around one day, so they stoned him out in the driveway till they busted the glasses on his face. They wouldn't sit with him on the bus to or from school. They wouldn't sit with him for lunch. They wouldn't talk to him in the halls at school. And when they were asked by other people in the school, other kids in the school, if he was related, they would say no, they'd deny him. This went on all through school. Well, one day, when he was 12, the girls dared him to drop his pants, so he did just that. He dropped his pants, and one of them went down on him. Her own accord. He didn't ask, he didn't force, he didn't even know what was going on, because he was not wise to the ways of the world in any way. Trust me, I know. And that fellatio, if you want to be proper about it, or if you want to be down to earth, that blowjob came back 5 years later when that girl got in trouble at school in a sexual manner, and she ended up speaking to the school social worker. And to get herself out of trouble, she blamed it all on her brother, little Al, who was immediately pulled from school by a couple of cops, and they took him into one of the conference rooms there at school, and they went over and over what his sister had to say about the situation, to the point that they could start a sentence and he could finish it. That's otherwise known as parroting, when they parrot back what it is they hear, automatically, because they've heard it so many times. And that's when they took him to the police department. And they didn't videotape him like they do most people. They audiotaped him. Because if they'd have videotaped him, it would have been obvious the boy had serious deficiencies, shall we say. Well, they charged him. They charged him with sexual assault without bodily harm. And I couldn't believe they did such a thing, since at the time he was 17 when this came out again. And I went out and I hired an attorney who was supposed to be a good defense attorney for such situations. And he had to wait till collected all the data from the police department, the social worker, etc., etc. And called us in one day and said, well, I think because of his confession, he should just plead guilty and take what he gets. And did not go over well with me, his mother. And little Al didn't understand what we were talking about. Needless to say, I fired the man. I said, no, that's not what we wanted. We wanted a not guilty, and we wanted a jury trial. Because any one of the members of the jury, if they had any knowledge of autism, Asperger's, they would have been able to disseminate that information to the rest of the jury. And I'm sure things would have come out in his favor. I fired him, and I found another attorney who had a son with Asperger's syndrome. I thought this was heaven sent. I plunked down more money, and turns out this man was too busy to bother with us. We didn't hear from him for months, until the night before his court date. We told him what we were looking for. We wanted a no guilty, not guilty, and we wanted a jury trial. Well, like that first attorney, he did say, if you give me another $10,000, I'll take it to trial. Well, I wasn't going to do that because he didn't do his job in the first place. This attorney called us the night before court and complained that he would have to spend most of his night up preparing paperwork. That kind of ticked me off because he had months to prepare and obviously didn't do what he was supposed to be doing. Well, it turns out the man was too busy because he was representing Tim Russell, who worked in Governor Scott Walker's county exec office in Milwaukee and skimmed 20 grand off the top of a veterans fundraiser for his own pocket. Well, when the judge in that case found out about the fact that the attorney, this Dennis Krieger, was also playing assistant district attorney in Fond du Lac County, he fired him from the job. Well, I found that out the morning of my grandson's court date. He never bothered to change the plea because he didn't get it in on time. And things went to hell in a handbasket real quick. Fired him. I ended up with another law firm, Lagman Law, a 501c3, not-for-profit law firm. And there was an attorney there, Elizabeth, who jumped on the case very nicely. She even went to her old Marquette University professor to ask him specific questions about how to handle the case properly. She went to court a couple times to let the court know she was going to be putting in a change of plea. She was new on the case, needed a little time. That was fine and dandy. Until the law firm called me one day and said that she's moved on. She moved out with her boyfriend to Wausau, Wisconsin, and that the paperwork had never been filed. It was found in my grandson's file, in the envelope, to be mailed, had never been mailed. And they couldn't do anything because there was a conflict of interest, because one of their own screwed up. They could no longer represent my grandson. They shipped him. All this time he'd been sitting in Waukesha County Jail. Not a place to be. All Republican-run county. Well, I ended up getting another attorney, and she put him on probation. If he violates his probation, he could be facing up to the full extent of the law, which is 60 years. I'm being very blunt. 60 years for a damn blowjob. Well, he couldn't come to live with me in Bayview because schools were too close. They wouldn't let him stay with his mother in Waukesha because there was a minor in the house. In other words, they found him guilty. And this was a preliminary. The judge even said that she knew he'd be back. So I brought him up to northern Wisconsin with me. what was supposed to be a hunting shack became a home. I left my wife behind in Milwaukee to tend to the house down there. It didn't take very long. Trying to support 2 households. Tapped out everything we had between the attorney's fees and trying to live in 2 places. He was going to offenders classes once every week, which meant 40 miles driving into Medford and 40 miles back. That was 80 miles a week. And the instructor asked him to write a letter of apology to his sister. He told me he couldn't do it. I said, "Grandpa, I can't do it. I didn't commit this. This was done to me. How can I write a letter of apology for something I didn't do?" And it really got to him. It really frustrated him. And one night he jumped out the window after I fell asleep and got in his little car, drove into Ladysmith, and got hooked up with the wrong elements. Got drunk and was picked up on the street drunk. They threw him in jail, and that's in Taylor County, or that was in Rusk County, Ladysmith. They transferred him to Taylor County, to Medford, where there was a bench warrant. Well, Medford put him in a halfway house. The only problem was it was him and another kid. There was no supervision of any kind. He had no money. And he went to the store, BP, and he stole some food, something to drink, and he got busted. They shipped him, they revoked his probation, his parole. They revoked it, which meant they had to ship him back down to Waukesha. But the court-appointed attorney did a good job by ripping the probation department a new one for not addressing his autism problems. They never got him any help, never got him any medical assistance, medication. They never did anything for him. They shipped him back to Waukesha, which meant another attorney. This time we got one, Melissa, court-appointed attorney, and I did a little background check on her and found out she interned for Governor Doyle and Senator Feingold, which gave me great hope. And she fought for him very diligently. She did everything that she could, and they would not allow her to change the plea because he'd already pleaded guilty. Well, they sentenced him to 6 years for a blowjob. But fortunately, they didn't send him to a hardcore prison. They sent him to Racine Youthful Offenders, which is far less problematic than a regular adult prison. Now I'm up north. We lost our house in Milwaukee. My wife is retired. And we're spending our golden years in a hunting shack, while he's spending 6 years in a prison. And they sent him to the hole for some of the stupidest reasons. 45 days because he wrote a poem about a rap group out of Detroit. They said it was a gang-related writing, and they sent him to the hole for 45 days. When he got out, they tossed his room again and found another poem in the same book that he was writing the first one. They sent him back for another 45 days. This was all within the first 3 months he was in racing. And I got some federal law, and I passed it along to the warden, to the social worker at Racine Youthful Offenders. And they said that's only applies to federal. I said, why wouldn't it apply to state? The boy's autistic. Well, we don't have any records of that. It turns out the judge in the case did not allow the information about his autism to be forwarded. We had 2 psychiatrists evaluate him and give him a rating of 62 for an IQ and agreed he had autism. The judge had her doctor check him out and said there's nothing wrong with him, he's perfectly normal, and that he had a perfectly lucid conversation with him. She threw out the other 2 psychiatrists and used hers in sentencing when she called him a street-smart punk who uses his disability to his advantage. Unbelievable. She said she knew how she was going to rule in that case from the very first day. And Deborah Blasius, the district attorney who handled the case, recommended he get full sentence, 60 years. How's that one for you? Well, they gave him 6 years with time served, which was about 2.5 years. And we have a tentative release date of May 15th, 2019. I dropped my cell phone so that I could pay for his monthly calls so he could call me. And he does once or twice a week. I'm on Social Security. My wife's on Social Security, so we can't afford much. I try to send him about $25 or whatever I can handle for his canteen so he can have odds and ends and not just what they slop on his tray. He's very lonely, very depressed, doesn't understand why he's there. Still has issues. We got him a TV and a couple other extras so he could do something while he's in there. He's locked in his cell for 18 hours out of the day. They won't put him in the hole anymore, but they do put him on restriction, which means he stays in his cell 23 hours a day. He's only let out to eat. No recreation time, no socialization, no nothing. That's basically the story of my grandson, little Al. Let it be a lesson, please. Other people, if your Aspie gets into trouble, get him help. Someone that can be an advocate or some attorney that knows about autism, or they're going to screw him royal. I'm still waiting. The sister that did this to him is going to be 18 in December of this year, 16. And I'm going to have a private investigator check into this situation. Her track record of rave parties and drinking and sex, and she has a lengthy bad story. Thank you for your time. Watch out for your Aspie.